Hello everyone. Tonight we step into a city that breathes dust and prophecy. The year is 1453, and Constantinople, this shimmering mosaic of ancient glory and crumbling stone, is holding on by the frayed hem of its robe. The streets are crowded with monks, merchants' ghosts, and the scent of overripe figs. Somewhere nearby, a cannon is being tested. It won't be the last time it screams. And you've just arrived. Just in time. You've never seen walls like these. You've never smelled fear like this. And unless you're made of miracles and mortar, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, where are you listening from? And what time is it over there? Drop it in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive through the southern gate on foot with a pack over one shoulder and sand in your teeth. The sun slants low across the skyline, catching on domes crosses and terracotta rooftops. From a distance, Constantinople still looks invincible. But up close, the makeup's cracking. You weren't supposed to be here. You were supposed to be heading west toward the Adriatic, maybe find a boat, a job, a life that doesn't involve ancient empires dying in real time. But you needed shelter, a place to rest. And this city, this place of saints and emperors, it pulled you in, like gravity or fate. You quickly realize this isn't just another city under siege. It's the city under siege. The walls are legendary. The church is older than kingdoms. And the people, they don't whisper about the war, they breathe it. It's in their eyes, in their posture, in their speed-walking pace, as if every errand might be the last. You hear the rumors immediately. Mehmed's camped outside the walls. Some say 200,000 men. His cannons can knock down mountains. He built a fortress on our side of the Bosphorus last year like it was nothing. His mother was a witch, or a nun, or both. You pass a tavern where someone has painted a crude sketch of the Sultan on the wall. Goat horns, serpent-tongued flaming sword. Above it, in Greek, the devil wears green. A boy tosses a rotten apple at it and runs. The streets are louder than you'd expect. Bells clang from towers. Donkeys bray. Market criers still shout their wares, though half of them look like they're ready to bolt. Lamb stew, one yells. Only 3 copper or 1 prayer. You keep walking. Past the Forum of Constantine, where pigeons now rule the ruins. Past beggars clustered near the shattered aqueduct, swapping rumors like currency. Past statues with no noses and fountains with no water. The city is beautiful, in the way that dying stars are beautiful, flickering defiant burning at the edges. You stop near a crowd outside a small church. A priest in a soot-stained robe shouts, "The angel will descend and protect us." You notice he doesn't sound convinced. Nearby, an old woman clutches a tiny icon of the Virgin and mutters, "Orban sold him the cannon. A Hungarian. A Christian, imagine that." You don't need to imagine. You'll hear that cannon soon enough. A soldier eyes you suspiciously. You knew? He grunts. You nod. He sighs. You'll want to find a place near the inner wall, less likely to collapse unless they tunnel. You blink. Tunnel. He doesn't answer. A child nearby is drawing something in the dust with a stick a wall. A crack. And then stick figures tumbling like dominoes. You pass a monastery with boarded windows. A smell hits you, incense and sweat and desperation. Inside, you glimpse a monk staring at an empty altar like he's waiting for it to speak. The ground rumbles. Everyone freezes. A second later, boom. Far off. A long, low growl that echoes off stone. People glance at one another. No one screams. No one runs. But you can feel it. That collective gut drop, like the city just remembered its expiration date. You turn toward the sound, can't see anything from here. But you know it was one of Mehmed's cannons, and you know it was a warning shot. You hurry onward. Near the harbor, a group of Genoese mercenaries is unloading crates. One of them spits into the sea and mutters, "If they get past the walls, we're done." The others ignore him. Or maybe they've heard it too many times. You try to find a place to sleep. An abandoned tenement near the old market square has space. Sort of. You lay down on a mat that smells like vinegar and regret. You hear someone coughing in the next room. A lullaby of rats above you. You close your eyes. You hear footsteps outside. Then the faint clink of metal. Then another boom. Louder this time. You don't sleep much. When dawn comes, the pigeons scatter. The sky is gray. The city smells like smoke and oil and wet stone. You get up, stretch, rub your face. You're still here. So is the city. But you both feel a little less alive than yesterday. You make your way west through the city, and every cobblestone seems to whisper stories, some glorious, most haunted. No matter which winding street you take, all paths eventually lead to the walls. And when you reach them, when you see them, you understand what all the old songs were about. The Theodosian walls, massive, grizzled, older than entire nations. They stretch 3 layers deep like a petrified dragon curled around its treasure-thick outer wall, towering inner wall. And in between, a service corridor filled with soldiers' cats and occasionally weeping. From ground level, the outer wall looks high. But when you climb the battlements and look out, that height seems small compared to the fear swelling on the other side. The Ottoman camp is spread like spilled ink across the hills, tents upon siege towers, upon boiling cauldrons of things you don't want to identify. Flags flutter, smoke curls, everything about it screams organized doom. You turn to the soldier beside you, gray-bearded, hollow-eyed, holding a spear that's seen better centuries. He says, "They won't storm us today." You ask why. He shrugs. Too hot. Then he chuckles like someone who's cracked long before the stone did. You pace along the parapet, trying to convince yourself the walls will hold. You pat the stone like it's a friend. Thick, yes. Solid. But you notice where the mortar has flaked, where previous cracks were repaired with mismatched bricks, and where someone has stuffed linen into a hole like it's a nosebleed. You run into a young engineer sketching reinforcement plans on a wax tablet. He's muttering, weight distribution, barrel vault, impact shock. He's the kind of man who should be designing aqueducts, not duct taping the last defense of an empire with theology and guesswork. You hear something from below? A thud, a scrape, the sound of heavy wood against earth. Siege platforms. You lean over the rampart and spot teams of Ottoman workers building raised causeways. You watch in horror as they fill the moat, not with dirt, but with debris. Trees, rocks, furniture, even the occasional livestock carcass. Anything that removes your elevation advantage. The bearded soldier spits over the side and mutters, "They've got time. And we've got sermons." He's not wrong. Down on the streets, priests are organizing prayer vigils. They chant in Latin, Greek, and at least one made-up dialect. A merchant lights a candle and then tries to sell you one. 2 copper, or 1 prayer, he says. You ask him if it works. He replies, only if you light it before the cannons hit. You spend the day shifting between the battlements and the streets, as if either one will feel safer eventually. Spoiler, they won't. By mid-afternoon, there's a commotion near the gate of St. Romanus. You rush over, turns out a cannonball landed just short of the wall. The crater is shallow, but the psychological damage is profound. A horse nearby broke loose and crashed through a spice stall. No casualties, except for a massive jar of cinnamon. A monk stands over the wreckage and declares, "This is a sign." Someone replies of what he pauses. We're not sure yet. As evening falls, the guard's chain shifts. You're not officially one of them, but you've lingered so long on the wall they start handing you things. First a bucket, then a spear, then a look that says, "Welcome to the end of the world." No training necessary. The city sounds different from up here at night. Less bustling, more breathing. Like a person asleep and dreaming of their own funeral. You hear owls, the distant chanting, footsteps echoing in the stone corridors behind you. And always, always the faint pounding of hammers beyond the moat as the Ottomans work through the dark. You duck into a small guard post to rest your legs. Inside a few candles, a chipped icon of St. Michael and a jug of what smells like regret in liquid form. One of the guards, Italian maybe Genoese, tells you, "We had a fort like this back home. Didn't fall." What happened? Earthquake? You both stare at the wall like it might shake under you right now, just to be ironic. He offers you a sip of his wine. You decline. He nods like that was the correct answer and pours it on the floor as an offering. "Better than drinking it," he says. Before you leave, he adds, "You want advice, you do. Don't get used to the walls. The moment you believe they're permanent, they let you down." You return to the parapet. The moon is up now, casting a silver glaze across the siege camp. From here, the tents look almost peaceful. Pretty even. You know better. You spot Mehmed's command tent, large, dark red, trimmed in gold. He's somewhere in there, waiting, watching, planning. You don't know much about war, but you know when someone's patient. And Mehmed is patient. That's what scares you most. There he is. You see him for the first time just after dawn, perched atop a black stallion, silhouetted against the gray sky like a statue that's just realized it's alive. Sultan Mehmed II, 19 years old, barely old enough to drink in some countries, and already determined to bring down the greatest walled city in history. You stare at him from atop the wall near the Adrianople gate, and even from this distance, you can tell he doesn't flinch, doesn't twitch, doesn't blink. He just watches. You squint trying to catch more detail. The golden trim on his cloak, the sharp lines of his beard, the casual way he holds his reins, like the whole world's already his, and Constantinople just hasn't gotten the memo yet. The soldier next to you mutters, "He never looks afraid. I've watched him sit there for hours." You ask, how can he be so calm? Because he knows something we don't. It's not a comforting answer. Rumor says Mehmed speaks 5 languages, reads Roman military texts for fun, and once had a fortress built across the Bosphorus just to insult the Byzantines. That fortress still there, still glaring at you like it knows this was inevitable. Historians still argue whether Mehmed's obsession with Constantinople was political or personal. Was it a holy war, a symbolic conquest, or did he just want to put an exclamation point at the end of the Roman Empire? You're not sure. But as you watch him raise one arm and a distant drumbeat begins, you realize something very simple. He plans to win, and he brought a cannon to prove it. No, not just a cannon. The cannon. The basilica. A supergun cast by a Hungarian named Orban. Legend says it took 60 oxen to move 3 hours to reload, and 1 unfortunate mule to test fire. You hear it before you feel it. A shrill whistle that slices through the air, followed by a boom so deep, you think your soul just blinked. The wall under your feet quivers like a bowl of unset custard. Pigeons panic. A crack spider webs across a nearby tower. You duck instinctively. Everyone ducks, even the seasoned guards with faces like carved wood. You stay low, heart-racing ears ringing. When you finally peek over the edge, you see the impact site, a crater big enough to bury a small chapel in. Stone, shattered dust everywhere, and a smear of what used to be a bronze plaque commemorating Emperor Theodosius. You wipe grit from your eyes and think that plaque survived earthquakes. Crusaders, centuries, not this. As the dust settles, soldiers rush to reinforce the breach. You're handed a bucket of sand again and pointed toward the gap. You stumble over fallen bricks, someone's severed spear shaft, and a surprisingly intact loaf of bread. You're not sure if it's from the last siege or just really stale. You try to help, really, but there's only so much patching you can do when a cannonball bigger than your torso just rearranged the geometry of your city. Back in the inner wall corridor, a Genoese officer shouts about bringing up Greek fire. A monk insists prayer will hold the gap better than tar. Someone else suggests bribing Mehmed. Bribe him with what the officer snaps. Historical significance. You sit down on a cracked bench and wipe the sweat from your neck. The air smells like sulfur and despair. Somewhere nearby, a bell tolls 3 times. Then again, for emphasis, or maybe panic. You ask a nearby guard what that signal means. He shrugs. Means somebody's dead or married. We've started using the same bells for both. Charming. By midday, Mehmed sends a second round of fire. Smaller cannons this time, probing shots. You watch the cannonballs arc lazily over the skyline before slamming into the walls with unnatural precision. The Ottomans aren't just testing your defenses. They're learning them, mapping impact, gauging thickness, turning your beloved wall into a jigsaw puzzle with no solution. And all the while, the Sultan sits, silent, observing. His men bring him figs, water, reports. He never leaves his post, doesn't need to. His message is clear: I'm not going anywhere. But you are. By late afternoon, the walls are groaning under their own weight. Engineers race along the battlements like bees in cassocks, trying to reinforce with timber sandbags, prayer whatever they can find. A city official paces below you, yelling into the air. We've survived the Arabs, the Bulgars, the Rus. We'll survive this too. You almost believe him. Then the cannon fires again. This time it hits just shy of your position, close enough to knock you flat and coat you in powdered stone. Your teeth rattle. Your ears ring. For a second, you forget your name. You don't know if you screamed. Someone else might have. The Genoese officer returns yelling, "This isn't a siege. It's a countdown." You dust yourself off and stare at the impact site. It's growing. Every shot digs deeper. Every boom is a slow heartbeat. The walls aren't cracking, they're remembering how to fall. The sun dips low, casting long shadows over the broken stone. You spot Mehmed one last time before nightfall. Still watching, still calm, still 19, and still winning. It's amazing how quickly you go from civilian passerby to part-time defender of civilization. One moment, you're trying to buy vinegar-soaked olives from a vendor with only 2 teeth and 4 conspiracy theories. The next, you're being handed a blunt spear and assigned to the wall near the Lycus Valley, also known as the spot most likely to explode into chaos. No formal oath, no armor fitting, just a shrug and a try not to die too quickly. You're not alone. The walls are lined with men like you, grocers, gravediggers, retired monks, one guy who claims he used to be a poet. Everyone's got a weapon they're not trained to use, and a face that's already written its last paragraph. Think of it this way. A captain jokes. If you hold the wall, you're a hero. If you die, you're a martyr. Either way, you get remembered. You don't mention that most martyrs don't get names, just stained glass windows with blank expressions. They assign you night watch, which sounds heroic until you realize it mostly involves squinting at darkness and trying not to imagine Ottoman sappers tunneling directly under your feet. The wind howls through the cracks in the stones. Rats scurry. Something drips continuously from a wooden beam. You decide not to investigate. Below the moat is silent. No movement, which is more terrifying than actual noise. You grip your spear and whisper to yourself, it's just a shift. 8 hours, that's it. But then comes the noise. Scraping, soft, rhythmic, deliberate. Someone or something is in the moat. You raise your torch. The flame flickers. You see nothing. But the sound continues. That's when another guard rushes toward you breathless. Diggers, he pants, under the Lycus. They're tunneling again. You want to ask who they are, how they got under the wall, and more importantly, why aren't we running away? But there's no time. You're sent into the tunnel crew. Yes, that's a real thing. The next hour is a frantic torchlit nightmare. You're lowered into a cramped shaft near the base of the wall. The air smells of damp clay and old blood. Every footstep is a squelch. You carry a crude pickaxe, a single candle stub, and an overwhelming sense of, I was not consulted about this. Your group stumbles forward deeper into the tunnels. You're not mining, you're counter-mining, trying to intercept Ottoman sappers before they reach the foundation and blow a hole in the wall big enough to drive a theological crisis through. The guy in front of you, a carpenter named Demetrios, whispers, last week they found one of the tunnels, collapsed it, took 30 men with it. You ask ours or theirs, he shrugs. At this point, does it matter? You keep going. The candle flickers, somewhere ahead scraping. Closer, and then a voice. Not a shout, just a murmur, in a language you don't know, followed by something that might be laughter, or coughing, or both. Then it stops. Everyone freezes. You're breathing so hard it feels like your lungs are trying to escape. Then, boom. No cannon this time. The ground shudders. A controlled collapse. They've detonated one of their tunnels. The wall holds, for now. You scramble out of the shaft like a mole being exercised. Covered in mud sweat, something that might be bone dust. Someone helps you up, slaps your back, laughs like this is all very normal. Back on the surface, the stars are out. And the fear hits different now. Before the threat was distant. Cannons, siege towers, men on hills. Now the threat is below, in the earth, under your feet, in the foundations. You finally get to rest just before dawn. Inside a guard post with cracked frescoes of saints who look as exhausted as you feel. You collapse onto a bench and stare at the ceiling, which is gently flaking into your eyes. The captain from earlier stops by and tosses you a water skin. Well, he says. You grunt. Still want olives, you don't answer. Because now for the first time you realize how fragile it all is. The wall, the city, the body, the idea of us. You fought underground with a candle and a shovel while an empire creaked above you. That's not war. That's archaeology in reverse. As the sun creeps into the sky, you stagger out to the parapet and look east. The Ottoman camp is waking up fires, relit flags, flapping siege crews stretching like it's a gym day. They're rested. They have tools. They know exactly where to dig. You have a cracked spear, a bruised shoulder, and a new fear of dirt. Congratulations. You're part of the defense now. You wake up with mortar dust in your mouth and a half-smashed olive in your pocket. You're not sure how either got there, but you keep the olive. Feels like a lucky charm. Or a snack. Possibly both. The cannon fire starts early. Not the heavy basilica today, but smaller shots targeted, repeated like they're tapping on the wall to see which part will say, ouch. You're back on duty before your legs have even agreed to the idea. They ache. Your shoulders burn. Your eyes sting. You're starting to understand how cities collapse not all at once, but slowly through sheer exhaustion. Today's task, you're handing out boiling oil. Yes, that's your job now. Not exactly civil engineering, is it? You're stationed at a high point along the middle wall near a damaged tower held together with rope hope and a very suspicious amount of scaffolding. Below you, the enemy is creeping forward, more platforms, more earthworks, more ladders that look like they're waiting to be tested on your face. Next to you stands a barrel of oil simmering over a small fire. It's sticky black and angry. A soldier hands you a ladle the size of your forearm and says, "Don't drop it, unless you mean to." You ask what happens if it spills. He says, "We all become barbecue for Christ." Right. You try not to look directly into the barrel. The smell is intense, like overcooked meat and burnt theology. You dip the ladle. It steams. When the first wave of attackers charge, not yet a full assault, just a test, you're told to wait. Wait for them to get close. Wait until you see their eyebrows. Then you pour. And oh, it works. You see the terror on their faces. You hear the screams. It's horrible. It's effective. It's unforgettable. You gag after the third pour. Not because of the gore, but because it's you doing it. You who once fainted at the sight of a goat giving birth. You're now weaponizing oil like a cooking show from hell. Later, during your short break, you pass a priest walking the inner wall with a censer. The incense mixes with the smell of oil and death. He says nothing, just nods, and then blesses the catapult you just used. Meanwhile, inside the city, things aren't much better. You try to find food. The bread lines stretch for blocks. The loaves are smaller now, coarse, smell faintly of mildew and mold. You chew it anyway. So does everyone else. You spot a man selling pigeon meat from under his cloak. He insists it's fresh. You don't ask how he caught it. Children chase each other through the alleyways, laughing in that too loud way that says, "We're pretending everything's fine." You pass a church where people are lighting candles for their family. One boy lights 5. You hope it's not for one person. Back at your post, you meet an old defender named Petros. Gray beard, no teeth. He's wrapped his feet in rags because his boots fell apart 2 weeks ago. He grins at you and says, "You know, when I was your age, I thought Constantinople could never fall." You nod politely. He adds, "But now I've seen our best cannon explode inward." You blink. "Yep," he says. "Too much powder. Fired once. Then pieces of it flew into the general's knee. He wept like a baby." Historians still argue whether that incident was an accident or sabotage. Either way, it's why you don't trust any cannon on your side now. Petros tells you another secret: the city is low on arrows. They've started pulling them out of dead attackers and reusing them. You laugh, then realize he's not joking. Later that evening, you're tasked with helping guard a supply cart headed for the southern tower. Inside, jugs of water, sacks of beans, and oddly painted icons of saints. When you ask why the saints are coming along, the driver says they're better protection than most of the soldiers. You don't disagree. Along the way, you hear music. Not beautiful, uplifting music. Not even patriotic music. It's a woman singing near a broken fountain. A lullaby in Greek. Sweet and flat and eerily calm. You pause. So does the guard walking next to you. For a moment, the city sounds human again. Then the cannon fires. It hits closer this time. Much closer. You drop flat. The cart tips. Beans spill everywhere. The water jugs shatter. The icons land face down in the mud. You help the driver up. He's bleeding from his scalp. His hands shake. He whispers, "We're feeding ghosts now." Back on the wall, someone's painted "still standing" in charcoal on a cracked turret. Underneath it, "for now." You take your turn with the oil again. This time you don't gag. You just pour, and try not to look too closely. At night, you walk back into the city. It's quieter than it should be. The bells have stopped. The prayers have grown softer. People are whispering more now, not in fear, but in resignation. You pass a baker's shop boarded up. On the door, a crude drawing of a loaf with wings. Next to it, "He is risen." You're not sure if they mean Christ or the last piece of bread. You climb into your corner of a tower to sleep. There's a draft, a leak, and something chewing on the wood nearby. You hug your spear like it's a teddy bear and close your eyes. The cannon fires once more. You don't even flinch. You hear it before you feel it. Boom! The sound rolls across the city like a god clearing its throat. Stone trembles. Birds launch into the air in startled waves. You're halfway through chewing a handful of dried beans when the wall shudders beneath you and you stop mid-bite, staring at your bowl like it just threatened you. Everyone else heard it too. A runner scrambles up the tower stairs shouting "Gate of St. Romanus, hit again." Whole sections crumbling. You don't ask if it's bad. You just go. When you reach the impact site, it's like arriving at the scene of a crime. But the criminal is a building, and it's also the victim. The cannon's latest shot landed squarely between two towers, and now the wall doesn't look like a wall anymore. It looks like a pile of architectural gilt. Bricks lie in heaps, mortar dust coats everything like snow. One of the support beams is literally split in two, as if struck by divine judgment. And somewhere in that chaos, someone is laughing. You spin around half expecting madness, but no. It's Petros again, sitting on a pile of rubble like it's a bench. He coughs, once wipes his nose with a sleeve, and says, "That one was personal." You want to ask how he can joke right now. But then, a man nearby starts singing hymns while dragging a barrel of pitch into position. The whole city seems to be doing that now, performing little rituals to cope with the big truth. The wall is breaking. And so are you. A group of soldiers moves past with giant timbers trying to shore up the crack. You help. Not because you're strong or useful, but because no one told you not to. You wedge beams under fractured stones. You nail boards across air. You listen as the foreman mutters, "This is glue on a corpse." Meanwhile, above you, scouts shout reports. They're moving the siege towers. They're aiming lower now. They're testing our reload times. It becomes clear this isn't just a bombardment. It's a strategy. Mehmed isn't knocking, he's measuring. He's mapping weaknesses like a surgeon before the incision, and he's getting faster. The second cannon fires by noon. You don't duck this time. It hits the same spot. You watch a section of outer wall slide downward like a rug being yanked from under the city's dignity. A dust cloud rises. You taste it in the back of your throat. It's older than your entire bloodline. A new problem emerges: panic. Some civilians rush toward the gap thinking they'll help. Others run the opposite way. Children cry. Someone screams, the wall is gone. Which is only half true but entirely unhelpful. A monk near the chaos throws his hands in the air and yells, "The angel will descend." You're starting to think the angel is late, or extremely metaphorical. Orders arrive. New ones. Brutal ones. You are to help pour Greek fire. If boiling oil is medieval pepper spray, Greek fire is medieval napalm with a side of divine mystery. Nobody knows exactly what it's made of. Historians still argue if it was petroleum pine resin quicklime or a recipe whispered by the devil into the ear of a pyromaniac monk. What you do know is it burns. on water, and it doesn't stop. You're given a ceramic grenade, a small round clay sphere sealed with wax. You're told to light the fuse and hurl it over the wall when the next wave of soldiers comes. You ask what happens if you drop it. They don't answer. You hold it anyway. You wait and wait. Then the next cannon fires. Not the same one. A different one. Closer. The Ottomans have moved their siege guns forward under cover of smoke and night raids. You can hear the creak of wooden wheels, the drumbeat of infantry, the rhythmic certainty of an army that knows it's about to win. The grenade is warm in your hand. A horn sounds in the distance. You see them. Hundreds of Ottomans rushing the breach, shields up, ladders, clanging voices raised not in rage, but in precision. You hurl the grenade. It spins through the air like a curse and vanishes into the breach. You hear the pop, then the whoosh, then the screams. You don't look, you just reload. The wall becomes a battleground. You see your first real hand-to-hand combat up close, grim, dirty. A boy not older than 17 swings an axe at a man already falling. A woman with a spear stabs through a soldier's leg. Someone throws a pot of human waste and yells, "In the name of the Lord." And yet they keep coming, wave after wave, until finally you hear it. A retreat horn. They pull back. You slump against the wall, shake, stare at your hands like they might confess something. Someone laughs nearby. Someone else cries. You can't tell who's alive or dead or somewhere in between. Later, you limp back to the inner city. The walls are still up, technically. But they feel smaller now. Less like protection, more like a theater set about to fall mid-performance. You pass a sign scrawled on a church door, "We do not kneel to fear." Underneath, in smaller writing. But we are sitting down now. You find a step. You sit. The cannon fires again. The city winces. And still you sit. Because you're too tired to stand. And tomorrow, it all happens again. You wake before the sun does because someone's shouting, and it's either about food or fire. You pray it's food. It's fire. A supply depot near the northern wall has gone up in flames. No one knows if it was sabotage, carelessness, or just Constantinople doing what it does best these days, falling apart. You grab a bucket and join the line. The fire's already half out by the time you get there, but the damage is done. Crates of dried lentils, sacks of grain, bundles of arrow shafts gone. Charred, melted into something that smells suspiciously like despair stew. Back at the city square, a new list is being read aloud. Ration reductions. Bread half portion, wine quarter pour, meat theoretical. You join the queue anyway. At this point, standing in line is how people feel human. The baker behind the table doesn't even pretend anymore. He hands you a roll the size of a baby's fist and says, "Try not to eat it all at once." You do. Immediately. You don't taste it. You don't care. You glance up at the Hagia Sophia's dome still holding. For now. Some say it's because of clever architecture. Others say angels are gripping it from the inside. Either way, a woman behind you mutters it better hold through Tuesday. The streets are quieter now, less crowded. People are either hiding or praying, or both. You pass shuttered shops, boarded homes, windows covered in blankets like they're trying to sleep through this. A donkey wanders by with no handler. You don't question it. Then you see something new, a line forming outside a church. Not for bread, for confession. The priest stands outside with a pale, tired face. He blesses each person, listens, nods, moves on. Everyone's got something to say before it's too late. You consider joining the line, but then you hear your name, or rather your description, the bucket one. From the south wall, you sigh, back to work. This time it's not oil, it's bodies. You're ordered to help move fallen defenders to a makeshift burial site outside the church of St. Thecla. You're given gloves that do nothing and a hand cart with one wheel that squeaks like it's judging you. You lift your first corpse. Young, maybe 16, arrow still in his ribs, eyes closed, mouth open. You don't cry. You don't speak. You just lift. The priest says a prayer over each as you pass. The same one, every time. It starts to feel less like comfort, more like punctuation. Between trips, you overhear more whispers. They're digging under the seawall now. 3 men disappeared near the cisterns. The Genoese want to leave. The mood in the city is stretched. It's not hopelessness exactly. It's thinness. Like everyone's spirit has been rolled out like dough to the edge of tearing. You find a short reprieve by the harbor. The air smells like salt fish and irony. The great chain still stretches across the entrance like a polite lie. The Ottomans ignore it now. Why wouldn't they? They bypassed it days ago. Their ships now rest in the harbor, staring smugly at your shore. You spot one of your own naval officers on the dock. You ask him, why don't we fight them? He laughs so hard he snorts. With what courage and bad intentions, you both watch as one of Mehmed's ships glides silently across the water. Its sails full, its crew efficient, its purpose clear. You don't wave. Later, back at the city walls, a general gives a speech. You don't catch all of it, but it involves words like valiant resistance and God's will. Someone claps, someone coughs. A woman nearby whispers, God's got a full calendar this month. You're put on shift at the inner gate. There's a lull in cannon fire, which is worse than the cannon fire. It means they're doing something. You just don't know what. You hear new music today. A chant drifting from a rooftop. Monks. Their voices low, steady, sorrowful. It almost calms you until a cannonball slams into a far-off tower with a sound like the end of a marriage. Your shift ends at dusk. You head to your corner of the barracks. It smells like mildew and men who've given up bathing. You lie on your mat and stare at the ceiling. You think about home. You think about olives. You think about whether Petros is still alive. You fall asleep with your boots on and dream of a table with bread that never runs out. You wake to your stomach growling louder than the drums. Someone hands you half a fig. You eat it like it's gold. At this point, it's not about if the Ottomans are getting in. It's about how many directions they'll choose. Because today you learned something astonishing. They figured out how to make ships go over land. You hear it first as gossip. A soldier near the gate of Blackernay says, I swear I saw a galley moving over the hill. Someone else laughs. Was it flying? But then you climb a tower near the harbor, and there it is. Ottoman ships floating on logs, rolling downhill like siege carriages from a nightmare. The impossible made logistics. They're not trying to break through the chain across the Golden Horn. They've simply gone around it. You blink, then blink again. Still there. One by one, the ships glide down a greased wooden roadway, dragged by oxen, pulleys, and willpower. Mehmed's engineers have turned topography into betrayal. They launched an entire fleet over a hill and slid it into your harbor. You don't say anything for a long time. Then you mutter, we're surrounded. A Genoese sailor next to you lights a pipe with shaking fingers and says, we've been surrounded. Now we're just out of excuses. He's right. The harbor was supposed to be safe. The chain across its mouth at the wall running its length, the confidence in your command of the sea, all of that's gone now. Ottoman galleys are inside, tucked smugly behind the chain, perfectly positioned to strike from the north. You rush to the docks. Soldiers and merchants are in full-blown panic. Some are dragging supplies inland, others are throwing barrels into the sea just to make space. One captain tries to set fire to his own ship before the Ottomans can seize it. You see a priest standing at the edge of the pier, chanting prayers and hurling holy water at the enemy vessels like they might dissolve. They don't. You're sent to help reposition the remaining Christian ships. Create a blockade inside the harbor, the order says. You don't ask what that means. You just row. You lash ropes. You throw crates of ballast overboard to lighten the hulls. The harbor becomes a floating chessboard of nervous maneuvering. But the Ottomans don't rush. They drift, calm, tactical, like sharks circling a drunk fisherman. Back on land, the city feels different now, like it knows it's been tricked. The mood is part rage, part admiration. You hear things like, "It's not even fair, and he moved ships over a hill." Who does that? Historians still argue whether Mehmed came up with the idea himself or borrowed it from earlier attempts by Venetian or Russian armies. Either way, it worked. You pass a group of scribes in the library copying a map of the harbor. One of them mutters, "We'll have to redraw it." The other says, "Why bother that night? Emperor Constantine calls for a closed meeting of commanders and allies." You don't get in, of course, you're nobody. But rumors drift down the corridors fast as rats. The emperor begged the Venetians for a breakout. The Genoese refused. Someone mentioned surrender. No one said it out loud. Instead, the emperor sends for relics. Yes, relics. Icons. Bones of saints. A robe said to belong to the Virgin herself. You help carry a small procession through the city. Torches held high. Monks singing. Citizens kneeling as you pass. Some sob. Others just stare. One woman presses a candle into your hand and whispers, "Put it somewhere holy." You don't know where that is anymore. Back in the harbor, the enemy ships are now anchored in tight formation. You can see them from the tower. Their oars rest silently. Their flags green and red flicker in the breeze like they're waiting for applause. In the market, someone has scrawled on a wall in charcoal, "The sea is theirs." The sky is next. Underneath it, pray sideways. A child throws stones at seagulls. A man swears at the sky. A woman tells her baby stories of angels with burning swords. And you sit on the seawall and stare across the water, at the ships that should not be there, at the impossible turn to normal. And for the first time, you understand that the fall won't come with a bang. It's already arrived, ship by ship, wheel by wheel, while everyone was waiting for something louder. You're not even surprised anymore. This morning, you watched an Ottoman galley silently drop anchor behind the city chain inside your harbor, and all you did was mutter, "Of course. The impossible is just the new normal now." But today the sea isn't the only thing turning against you. There's a new sound in the air. Drums, low, constant, methodical. From the Ottoman side, but close enough to feel in your ribs. They echo through the alleyways and wrap around church spires. It's not music. It's pressure. Inside the city, something is shifting. It's not panic, not anymore. That was last week. Now it's something colder. Like the whole city is resigning itself to a bad ending. The baker you passed, daily gone. His shop shuttered. A sign on the door says, "See you in heaven." You doubt it was meant to be funny. The streets are dotted with little clusters of people. Some pray, some sharpen weapons, some argue about prophecy. You hear one man shouting near the Hagia Sophia, "The angel will descend and strike the invaders." Someone else shouts back, "He's late." There's laughter. Bitter. A little too loud. The emperor has issued a public decree. No one may speak of surrender. Anyone caught spreading rumors of capitulation will be punished. harshly. So now people don't say surrender. They say things like alternate conclusion or graceful transition or simply the quiet option. You walk through the Blackernai quarter where the houses lean in too close, the stones remember too much, and the air feels thinner by the minute. You spot a man painting crosses on his door with wine. Not blood, not oil, wine. You ask him why. He says, so the angel of death knows we're already drunk. Up on the wall, the Ottoman siege towers are getting closer. They're taller now, reinforced, and disturbingly painted. Painted with faces, grinning skulls, flames, symbols in languages you don't read. Psychological warfare by brushstroke. A Genoese officer near you mutters, "This is art school from hell." The wall creaks when you lean on it. You don't lean for long. That afternoon the moon rises early. Not white, not gold, red. Not crimson or rose or poetic metaphor red, no. It's the color of a fresh wound. The city sees it and goes silent. Even the dogs stop barking. You hear someone say, "This is it," and another, "They said this would happen." And someone else softly, "We're in the prophecy now." Historians still argue whether the blood moon on May 22nd was a real lunar eclipse or a tale embroidered by desperate minds. But you saw it. And it didn't look like a natural phenomenon. It looked like a warning. The emperor orders a massive procession. Every relic in the city is paraded through the streets. Saints' bones, ancient crosses, fragments of what people hope is the true cross. Even a chalice said to have been touched by Christ. You march beside them, holding a lantern, listening to chants in languages you don't understand. People kneel in doorways. A woman cries out, "Save us." A boy throws flower petals under the feet of a statue. You watch it all and think, are we asking for salvation or for a better ending? That night, the bells don't stop. They ring from every church, every chapel, every broken tower with a functioning rope. Not in harmony, not in time, just sound. Desperate crashing sound. Someone lights a fire in the plaza. Not a riot, just a need for light. Others gather. They sing. Off-key, some drunk, some crying, some both. You sit nearby, picking at a splinter in your boot, watching embers drift up like fireflies seeking permission to escape. Then come the owls. Dozens of them. They circle the Hagia Sophia. Silent. Perfect. Unnatural. You see them and whisper. Now a guard next to you says, "Always before a fall." You don't know if he means the birds or the silence that follows. Back at your post near the inner gate, the wind shifts, carries the scent of jasmine and smoke and something metallic. You lean over the parapet and see them, not charging, not shouting, just waiting. 1,000 soldiers backlit by firelight in perfect formation, not moving, not blinking. You realize the siege isn't about weapons anymore. It's about will. And yours is being drained one whisper at a time. You don't remember falling asleep, only waking up with your back against cold stone and your jaw aching from clenching in your sleep. It's the 27th of May. You've lost track of how many days the siege has lasted. Time inside a dying city is like old parchment, brittle and easy to smudge. Every hour feels like a week, and every breath feels like it might be your last normal one. Something is different today. The wind is too still. The birds are gone. Even the rats seem shy. At midday, word arrives that Mehmed's engineers have finished a final set of ramps and siege towers. They're tall enough now to look over the walls. You hear one soldier say, "We're not defending a wall anymore. We're hiding behind a line." Later, the emperor calls a final war council in the Blackernay Palace. You're not there, but people talk. Oh, do they talk? They say Constantine the Ninth stood in armor, not robes. That he held no scepter. That he spoke like a general, not a ruler. We will not surrender, he said. We will die as Romans. Others say he didn't mention Rome at all. That he simply said, they are coming, and left the room. In the streets, torches are lit hours before dusk. Not for light, but for courage. Children carry candles through alleyways. Women hang icons from windows. Men sharpen whatever's left, daggers, axes, table legs. You hear someone singing again near the old forum. It's a hymn, or maybe a lullaby. The sun begins to set, and with it, the city exhales like it knows this is the last night. Every church fills. The Hagia Sophia overflows, not with nobility, but with everyone. Merchants, soldiers, mothers, thieves, drunks, choir boys. Men who haven't spoken in days now kneel next to women they once robbed. No one speaks of differences, just of endings. You slip inside with the crowd. The candles blur together. The icons seem to glow with something more than wax. You hear prayers in every language you know and a few you don't. Lord, have mercy. Protect the city. Forgive me. Remember me. You find a place near the side aisle between a broken pillar and a man cradling a sword. His hands shake. He cries. You don't know his name. You don't ask. The air smells of incense sweat and something like iron. Then a strange silence. The choir stops. Someone near the altar steps forward. It's the emperor, Constantine. Not a mask, not a symbol. A man. He kneels before the altar, presses his forehead to the stone, and stays there. No words, just posture. A priest begins the divine liturgy. The congregation sings with broken voices. It echoes through the dome, through time. This is the last Christian Mass ever held in the Hagia Sophia. You are here. You stand when everyone else stands. You whisper the prayers. You make the sign of the cross with fingers you can't feel. Afterward, people leave slowly. Some return to the walls. Some go home. Some simply wander. You walk the streets in a daze. You see a man burying silver in a garden. You pass a woman who offers you bread and doesn't ask for anything in return. You reach your tower just as the drums start again. Not loud, not fast, measured. Boom. Pause. Boom. Pause, like a heartbeat. You climb to your post. Petros is there, still alive, still chewing something unpleasant. He looks at you and says, tomorrow. You nod. He adds, they'll come at dawn. Maybe before. Then you scared, you say a little? He says, good. That means you still care. A runner delivers a final message, a slip of parchment. It says, hold your position. No retreat. The city stands tonight. You pin it to the wall. As night settles over the towers, you look across the skyline. Fires burn in both camps. The Ottomans are organized symmetrical. Yours, less so. But they still burn. You sit beside Petros and share what's left of your bread. He tells you a story about his first battle. You tell him about the donkey you saw wandering with dignity through the forum. You both laugh, quietly. Eventually, he leans back and says, if I die tomorrow, I hope it's quick. You say nothing. He adds, and I hope someone remembers I tried. You nod. Then silence again. A silence so thick you can hear the ocean breathing. The stars blink through the haze. The moon hangs high and pale. You lie down, spear across your chest, eyes on the sky. You whisper a prayer, though you're not sure who's listening anymore. You don't sleep, but your body rests. Because soon, very soon, you will have to stand. And when you do, the walls won't matter. Only you will. The sky begins to shift just before dawn. an almost imperceptible fade from black to indigo. You've been watching it for what feels like hours, perched on the rampart with your back against the cold stone legs pulled to your chest like a child hiding from thunder. But there's no hiding now. The real thunder is coming. All across the walls you see motion soldiers adjusting helmets, tying belts, passing around waterskins like communion. The faces around you are pale and expressionless, not blank from fear, but emptied by it. Everyone here has already grieved themselves. Now they're just waiting for the paperwork. And then the horns begin. Not your horns. Theirs. Ottoman war horns scream across the dawn like wolves howling through brass. Deep animal sounds that grab your gut and twist. They come from everywhere. Land, sea tunnels, towers. It's not music. It's a declaration. You run to the battlement and look out. The Ottomans are moving. Tens of thousands of them surging forward like a tide that's been building for weeks and is finally free to break. Siege towers roll. Ladders rise. Arrows arc overhead like black rain. And the drums, dear God, the drums. Faster now. Relentless. Like heartbeats from something inhuman. Your captain yells orders, but you barely hear them over the sound of arrows slicing the air and screams already rising from the Lycus Valley. Then comes the first crash. A ram hits the outer gate. A boom so loud it knocks a brick loose beside your head. Men fall. Oil is poured. Arrows return fire. And Greek fire is hurled again, but this time it lands short, splashing into your own defenses. A soldier behind you catches a burning shard. He doesn't scream. He just looks surprised, then disappears over the side. You don't have time to mourn. They're climbing. You see them on the ladders now, Ottomans swarming like ants, climbing 3 stories high with speed that feels unfair. You jab your spear downward, misjab again, hit. Oh God, you feel the impact travel up your arm. You pull back. Blood on the tip. Petros beside you shouts something in Greek and hurls a stone the size of your head. It crushes a helmet below, and for a moment you think maybe. Then you look left. The Kirkoporta gate, a small side entrance long neglected, is open. Wide enough for 3 men, and suddenly 30 are running through it. You scream. You point. You wave. Someone sees. Someone doesn't. The breach has begun. Historians still argue how that gate was left open. Sabotage, forgotten patrol, divine irony. But from your place on the wall, it doesn't matter. What matters is that they're in. Everything fractures. The defense collapses like glass underfoot. Your captain shouts, "Fall back," and is cut off mid-word by a spear through the chest. You jump down from the wall, sprint, duck arrows, dodge flames. The city is changing under your feet. Streets you knew become war zones. Alleys turn to blood-slick corridors. Fires erupt seemingly out of air. A cart of grain explodes in front of you, not from gunpowder, but from sheer chaos. You reach a square where civilians are trying to form a line. It's useless. The Ottomans are already pouring in from 3 directions. You see women dragged from doorways, children clinging to fathers who no longer know what to do. One man holds a crucifix like a sword and screams Latin until he's cut down mid-prayer. You run. You don't think, you just run. Down a back alley, through a broken courtyard, past a burning tapestry that used to hang in the emperor's court, past a scholar clutching a book and sobbing. This wasn't supposed to happen. You find yourself near the Hagia Sophia, and so does everyone else. A flood of bodies pushes toward the basilica, the last refuge, the last hope. The myth. They say no one can be killed within its walls, that Mehmed himself will spare it, that it is holy enough to be exempt from conquest. You don't believe any of that. But you run there anyway. As you push through the massive doors, you glance back just long enough to see the walls behind you fall. Not metaphorically, actually. They crumble like sand castles under a rising tide. And above it all, you see their banner rising. The red crescent, the symbol of the new empire. The one you didn't believe in until it arrived on your street. You press yourself into the basilica. You are not alone. Thousands are packed inside, crying, kneeling, shouting, whispering. A priest climbs to the altar and begins singing. His voice cracks. No one joins him. You collapse to your knees. The marble floor is warm. Or maybe that's just your body giving up the idea of cold. You listen as the doors behind you shake, then buckle, then break, and the drums stop. Now it's just boots. Boots on stone, coming closer. The doors don't crash open all at once. It's slower than you imagined, wood groaning, iron hinges, bending a chorus of cracking splinters that feels like the breaking of something sacred. Someone near you screams. Someone else whispers a prayer through chattering teeth. The Hagia Sophia grand as the heavens, and just as silent trembles as Ottoman soldiers spill into the narthex. There's no slaughter, not yet. Just movement. Boots, blades, eyes scanning the sanctuary like they've found a dragon's hoard. Their faces are unreadable. Not rage, not celebration. Something colder. Purpose. The priest at the altar keeps singing until he doesn't. A soldier walks up the central aisle and draws his scimitar. The chant falters. The congregation collapses inward, people falling to their knees, clutching children, burying their faces in the robes of strangers. You stand frozen beneath the great dome, its gold mosaics still catching the dawn light. You think this is the last time anyone will ever see it this way. One soldier rips a crucifix from the wall. Another kicks over a candelabra. Then you hear it. The emperor is dead. The word comes like a wave passed mouth to mouth, a ripple across the gathered crowd. The emperor fell at the gate of St. Romanus. No body, no crown, just the rumor of finality. Some say Constantine threw off his imperial robes and died with a common soldier's sword in hand. Others say he vanished, fled, ascended. You believe he fell. Because something inside you did too. A mother beside you clutches her baby and whispers, "Now it begins." And she's right. The sack starts slowly, systematically. Ottoman soldiers pour through the streets in waves. At first they search. Then they strip. Then they take. No corner of the city is spared. You leave the basilica while you still can through a side passage opened by a trembling deacon who mouths "run" and then disappears into shadow. The city you enter is not the city you remember. Smoke rises from every hill. Statues lie shattered. Fires bloom like red flowers in every district. Looters, both Ottoman and local, tear through shops, palaces, homes. Everything is being unwritten. A noble's mansion burns beside a stable. Children scream in languages that don't understand war. And you run. Through broken gardens, through ruined plazas. Past fountains now overflowing with blood and silk. You duck into a courtyard and trip over a tapestry embroidered with saints now used to wrap a corpse. You don't know where you're going, but you're moving. You have to move. You pass the old bronze horses from the hippodrome. One is missing a leg. Another is covered in ash. A soldier is dragging the third onto a cart. You want to stop him. You don't. Everywhere you see the symbols of an empire being unstitched. Mosaics scraped from walls, altars overturned, books burned, banners torn. One soldier, young, maybe younger than you, offers you a piece of bread. You don't take it. You don't know why. You keep walking. or limping. It's hard to tell which. Somewhere near the cisterns, you stumble across Petros, alive, barely. He's leaning against a wall, holding a gash on his leg and smiling. Still here, he rasps. You nod. Then I guess we lost, he says. You sit beside him. Neither of you speaks for a while. In the distance, a church bell rings. You wonder who's still ringing it and why. Eventually, Petros says, they'll make it theirs now. Turn our churches into mosques, our houses into barracks, our maps into history. You ask, will anyone remember us? He looks at you with the saddest smile you've ever seen and says, that's the part no one tells you about the fall. You're not killed, you're replaced. He dies an hour later. You close his eyes. You take his belt, his water flask. Not because you want to, but because that's what survivors do. The city is still burning, but slower now. The looting becomes less frantic. The screams become background noise. The Ottomans raise their banners above the palaces, and over the Hagia Sophia, and over the very walls that failed to hold them back. And still you walk. You pass a group of musicians playing softly in a ruined courtyard. You pass a little girl sleeping beside a statue of the Virgin using a torn imperial banner as a blanket. You pass a man praying to both Christ and Allah in the same breath. You pass memory and enter after. At some point you stop running, not because you've reached safety, there's no such place anymore, but because your body simply gives up. Your knees buckle, your breath comes out ragged. You lean against a wall that used to be part of a bathhouse and slide down it, scraping your back on a mosaic of dolphins that still somehow smiles. The city has fallen, and you're alive, which doesn't feel like a victory. Across the street, a line of captives is being marched under guard hands, bound heads bowed, men, women, children. Some whimper, others walk in silence. One woman carries a bundle wrapped in cloth. You think it might be a baby. You hope it's not a memory. A boy breaks from the line and runs. He doesn't get far. You don't look away. You don't look anywhere. The ash in the air coats your tongue. The sky is smeared with smoke and strange light, half gold, half gray. It feels like the city is stuck between two stories, unsure which ending to choose. You force yourself up. Your muscles creak. Every step feels like dragging a stone coffin. You limp toward the Mese, what used to be the Grand Avenue of the Empire. Now it's a graveyard of splintered columns, abandoned chariots, and shattered icons. You pass a burning library. A soldier tosses scrolls out the window like firewood. You don't know what was written on them. No one ever will. At the next plaza, you spot a merchant you vaguely remember. He used to sell sweet wine and almonds. Now he sits cross-legged in the rubble, quietly arranging broken pottery into little spirals. You ask him why. He says, because if I don't, there'll be nothing left in order. Then he offers you a shard with a painted eye. You carry it with you. Near the old walls, you find the bodies. Dozens, hundreds. Some dressed in silk, others in nothing at all. Some curled as if asleep, others sprawled in positions that make your stomach turn. The birds have already arrived. You see no sign of Constantine the V, but you do see what he left behind, the pieces of an empire strewn like glass after a storm. You cross into the palace district, what remains of it. The gates are open. The treasures are gone. The fountains have run dry. You walk the marble floors of emperors like a ghost who hasn't yet realized he's dead. In one chamber, you find an Ottoman officer sitting on a throne, casually, one leg draped over the side. He's eating grapes. He doesn't look at you, and you don't say anything, because you know what this is. The end of Byzantium. of the empire that once stretched from Italy to Syria, from Africa to Armenia. The city that outlasted Rome, that defied crusaders, earthquakes, famines, and betrayal after betrayal. The city whose walls were supposed to be eternal. But nothing is eternal. Not when a teenager with a cannon and a vision decides otherwise. You wander to the harbor, where the Ottoman Navy now bobs gently inside the chain you once trusted. To the market, where looters now auction off relics beside stalls of fruit. To the hippodrome, where a new banner is being raised, red and gold, bold and unfamiliar. And finally to the monastery of Christ, Pantocrator, where a priest hides in the shadows, clutching a burned icon to his chest and whispering, "We are not lost. We are hidden. You leave him there, because faith is not what you're looking for." You reach the walls again by evening, what's left of them. You sit where you once stood guard. You stare at the horizon. And finally, you let yourself cry. Not loud, not desperate, just a steady, quiet grief. For Petros, for the emperor, for the baker and the donkey and the boy who drew crosses in the dust. For the songs no one will sing again, and for yourself. Because there's no place for you in this new world. You're not dead. You're just forgotten. And in some ways, that's worse. You lie back and watch the sky turn violet, then black. No stars tonight. No torches. Only the soft sound of boots walking through your memories. You close your eyes and wait to become one of them. Time loses meaning after the fall. There are no more hours, no bells to mark prayers, no shifts to guard, no markets to open or walls to inspect. There's just before, when you still had a city, and after when you didn't. You wake in a doorway near the southern wall, not by choice. You fell asleep there without realizing, curled against the stone like it could protect you one last time. It didn't. A child passes by dragging a doll with no head. A man with an Ottoman turban leads a string of captives toward the harbor, where ships wait to take the strongest to Anatolia. You think you recognize someone in the line, but you're not sure. Everyone looks like they've been folded in half. You're not on any list. Not valuable enough for ransom. Not dangerous enough to kill. You're residue. You spend the morning walking. That's all you do now. You pass churches turned into stables, monasteries turned into barracks, saints chipped from walls and replaced with banners that glint green and red. You pass a man playing a flute outside what used to be a bakery. The tune is cheerful. His eyes are blank. You reach the Hagia Sophia and it hits you like a fist. It's already been converted. The cross is gone. The altar is stripped. Prayer rugs lie across the mosaic floor like polite apologies. You walk in barefoot, not because you were told to, but because it feels wrong not to. You sit in the corner exactly where you sat the night of the last liturgy. But the air is different now. The echoes changed. The songs have fled. A boy sweeps the floor. He hums. You wonder what he sees when he looks up at the dome. Does he feel awe or ownership? You don't ask. You leave quietly. In the palace, Mehmed has already made his tour. He was said to have stood in the Hagia Sophia the morning of the 29th, gazed up at the dome, listened to the silence, then whispered, "So this is what I've taken." Historians debate whether it's true. But if it is, it's the most honest sentence you've ever heard. You reach the old forum in the afternoon, what used to be a place of law, of announcements, of ceremony. Now it's a place of sorting, goods, people, corpses. You help an old woman lift a sack onto her cart. She thanks you in Latin. You nod in Greek. Neither of you knows what country you're in anymore. A soldier nearby calls out for names. Who among you knows medicine? You raise a hand. Not because you do, but because you need something to do besides remember. You're brought to a makeshift tent near the cisterns. Inside wounded lie in rows, Byzantine and Ottoman alike. Some groan, some don't. You clean wounds, boil cloth, cut fabric for tourniquets. One boy looks up at you, blood on his lips, and says, "Am I in paradise?" You say yes, because it's kinder than no. You work until dark, until your hands are blistered and your clothes stink of infection and ash. And still, it's better than doing nothing. On the way back, you pass a mural you used to admire Christ Pantocrator, watching from a dome now blackened with smoke. Only his eyes remain intact. You nod to him. He doesn't nod back. You find shelter in a ruined courtyard, once part of a noble house, now open to the sky. You sit on broken marble steps and share a crust of bread with a cat that refuses to die. You whisper to it, "We're the last Byzantines." It licks its paw. You laugh, a dry sound like stone cracking. You think of Petros, of the boy with the candle, of the emperor, of everyone who thought walls were enough. And slowly you realize something. You survived. And that's not nothing. It's not glory, not triumph, but it's resistance. Because tomorrow someone will ask what happened here. And maybe you'll still be around to answer. Even if your voice is hoarse, even if your story feels like a myth, even if you forget your own name, you'll remember the city and say, "I was there when the world ended. And I walked out of the ashes, not as a soldier, not as a hero, but as a witness." By the second day after the fall, the city has settled into a strange, bruised silence. The shouting has faded. The fires smolder rather than blaze. The drums have stopped. Now it's just footsteps on marble, the occasional weeping, and the soft creak of banners being taken down or hoisted up. You wake in a garden that used to belong to someone rich. You can tell by the cracked fountain shaped like a lion. The water's gone, but moss has taken over, curling like ivy into the marble's throat. A boy walks past, carrying a mirror. It's cracked. He holds it close, like it's the last thing that proves he exists. No one tells you what to do anymore. You're not a citizen, not a soldier, not a prisoner. You're a remnant. The Ottomans have begun cataloging the city, tallying buildings, mapping districts, recording which mosques used to be churches and which ruins are worth rebuilding. They leave the broken things alone for now. You return to the palace district, stepping carefully around shattered columns and door frames. In one chamber, Ottoman scribes are sitting cross-legged, copying inventory lists from the imperial treasury. One of them offers you a fig. You take it. You say thank you. He nods like you're equals. That night you find yourself once again on the walls. It's quiet now. Too quiet. You sit where you first stood weeks ago, just a visitor. Just someone who came here by chance. You run your fingers along the stone. It's warm from the day's sun. It still feels like a wall. But it doesn't mean what it did before. You close your eyes and try to remember how it sounded when the city still believed in itself. You can't. But you remember the bakery, the donkey, the sound of bells in the rain, the procession of relics, the quiet bravery of people who fought with oil and bread and prayer. You remember Petros? You remember you. Below the wall, you see children playing in the dirt. One of them waves a stick like a sword. Another draws the shape of a city in the dust, surrounded by circles, walls, towers, gates. The boy asks, "What is it?" The girl says, "A place that used to be important." The boy replies, "Can we build it again?" The girl shrugs. "Maybe." You smile. For the first time in days, maybe longer. Because cities fall, but people remember, and stories remain. Someone will tell this tale one day. Maybe not accurately, maybe not kindly. But the name Constantinople will never quite disappear. It will echo in history books, whispered in corners, painted on ceilings carved into coins. Even when it becomes Istanbul, the bones will still be here, still humming beneath the surface. You stand, not because you have to, but because you're ready. One last time you look back at the skyline, not the one you knew, but the one that rose from it. A city lost, an empire ended, a witness standing in the rubble. That's you. That's who made it through. And when someone asks what it felt like, you'll tell them it felt like thunder and prayers and boiling oil. It felt like bread shared with strangers. It felt like ghosts and saints and songs that cracked as they were sung. But mostly it felt like the end of the world and the beginning of something else. And now, slowly, let's step away from the walls. Let the dust settle behind your eyes, the drums fade into the background of your imagination. The firelight dims. The wind carries the last echoes of chants and cannon across the Bosphorus. There's no need to hold your breath anymore. You're safe now. The fall of Constantinople wasn't just the end of a city. It was the end of a story and the beginning of hundreds more. The echoes of those stone walls carried forward through centuries of memory, of retellings, of rediscoveries. And now, through you, you walked the alleys. You felt the tremors in the stones. You watched an empire exhale its final breath. And still you're here. So let that story settle gently in your chest, not as a weight, but as a rhythm, a heartbeat, the kind that outlasts siege and fire. No need to rush back to reality. Let your body rest. Let your thoughts become quieter. Let your breath follow the pattern of a city sleeping under moonlight, heavy with memory, but held by time. You're not in danger. You're in your bed. The siege is over. And though history may have forgotten your name tonight, your journey mattered. So close your eyes. Let the city fade and drift slowly into dreams.